Well, that silly season that comes along about every 2 years is rapidly approaching. Congressional elections. With these being midterm elections, there are no presidential candidates to hog the airwaves, and we get to hear much more about what the candidates running for Congress are saying. Luckily, in my home state, there hasn't, as yet, been anything said by any candidates to be considered truly newsworthy. Seeing as it isn't even Labor Day yet, and there's still plenty of time for my local candidates to roll out their gaff machines. I meant to say give interviews and make speeches. If only other states were as lucky as Ohio. Georgia has two politicians seeking election who have a limited grasp on reality. The most important one is the walking, talking gaff generator running for U.S. Senate, Herschel Walker. Republicans should be using him to secure more money for research to look at chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That is the only reason that I can see that he has such a tenuous grasp on reality. That or he tells lies as easily as he breathes. Take your pick. Said he was a successful entrepreneur who founded a meatpacking company that employed over 1,000 people. Well, actually, he licensed his name to the company that has 8 employees. Said he graduated top of his class at the University of Georgia where he played football. Except he left after his junior year to play professional football and never did go back to finish his degree. Walker said that he has a degree in criminal justice from the same university he didn't graduate from. Told groups he was in law enforcement. He told folks that he was a Cobb County deputy sheriff. Then he backtracked, saying he was an honorary deputy, which the Cobb County Sheriff's Office says isn't true at all. He has told groups that he trained at Quantico and was an FBI agent. The FBI requires at least a bachelor's degree, which Walker never received, and 20 weeks of training at the FBI Academy at Quantico, Virginia. He did spend a week at the academy going through the obstacle course and possibly fired a few guns, but was never anything more than a VIP visitor. He's talked about his son Christian, age 22, and about how a man should be a father to their children. Always saying the father leaves in the black family, and he leaves the boys alone to be raised by their mom. If you have a child with a woman, even if you leave that woman, even if you have to leave that woman, don't leave that child. The only problem with that statement is that Walker's been forced to acknowledge by his own campaign staff that he in fact has 3 children with women other than his wife, and that all he ever did was pay child support. A son, age 10, who he has no contact with, a 13-year-old son that he has had very limited contact with, an adult daughter he fathered when he was in college. Simply paying child support hardly qualifies as being part of your children's lives. Herschel's statements about air pollution and climate change have been described as sounding a lot like a 5th grader who's giving a book report about a book he hasn't even opened. Here's the quote: "You just can't make this stuff up. We in America have some of the cleanest air and cleanest water of anyone in the world." Well, not quite true. He should have stopped right there. But he didn't. Continuing on, he said, "Since we don't control the air, our good air decide to float over to China's bad air. So when China gets our good air, their bad air got to move. It moves over to our good airspace. Then, now we have to go back and clean it up." When asked about the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, he replied, "Cain killed Abel. That's a problem that we have." And I said, what we need to do is look at how we can stop these things. They talk about disinformation. What about getting a department that could look at young men that's looking at women that looking at social media? What about doing that? Pardon? I missed something. A recent Quinnipiac University poll of registered Georgia voters showed Walker trailing Senator Raphael Warnock 45% to 55%. And it's not even September yet. Is it any surprise that one of Walker's campaign ads described his bid as, "It's like a shit show on a train in the middle of a wreck"? If Herschel Walker was the only Georgia candidate that made outrageous statements, that wouldn't be so bad. But they also had the representative from Georgia's 14th district, that soundbite machine named Marjorie Taylor Greene. By all accounts, the district that she represents does have a history of electing odd, outspoken, divisive House members, which may go a long way to explaining her support, and that it is 84% white and staunchly Republican. Here are a few of Soundbite Marjorie's loudest and most recent rants. On her podcast, she read from a proposal that the Navy find a cuisine that includes more plant-based sources of protein for sailors. It creates a pilot program for research and development of plant-based protein for consumption by members of the Navy. It also requires a report specifying the effective criteria to include plant-based protein options at naval facilities. I guess this is to make military food more palatable to vegetarians and vegans. But then she went off the rails. Lab-grown fake meat is what the Navy is going to be able to eat, she said. Sailors will have no choice but to eat this plant-based fake meat. And bugs, probably, because I'm sure Bill Gates is creating the entire menu for the Navy. As if it's hard enough to recruit people in the military, now they're going to be feeding them Krabby Patties. I bet you Krabby Patties would actually taste a lot better than Bill Gates' fake meat. It's disgusting. On Democrats' view on abortions, they want to make abortions legal up to the day of birth. Pardon me, but third trimester abortions have never been legal in any state since the fetus is viable at that stage outside the womb. In her opinion, California is the cause of all the country's ills. If this was California, you could steal baby formula up to $900 worth with no consequences, but in Georgia, we respect the law. There are now security sensors on the very cans of baby formula that can be found, except theft doesn't become a felony in her home state until it exceeds $1,500. On the shootings on the 4th of July, 2 shootings on the 4th of July, one in a rich white neighborhood and the other at a fireworks display. It almost sounds like it's designed to persuade Republicans to go along with more gun control. I mean, after all, remember, we didn't see that happen at all parades in the month of June. As soon as we hit MAGA months, as soon as we hit the month that we're all celebrating loving our country, we have shootings on July 4th. I mean, that's, that would sound like conspiracy theory, right? Of course. But what's the definition of right-wing conspiracy theory? Well, by the way, it's the news that's just 6 months early. Is she supporting mass murder after the next Congress is seated, or is she just insane? On a bill to codify the rights of people to use contraception, we got the contraceptive bill. That's an easy one for me. Vote no. Sounds like she approves of Clarence Thomas' view on substantive due process and the rights for people to choose whether to use contraception. After Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was verbally insulted on the Capitol steps by Alex Stein, the same Alex Stein who was forcibly removed from the Texas Republican Convention. Stein was spewing sexually explicit and racist comments. Green said that his comments were quite the compliment, and went on to say, I think a woman should be confident. And if a man gives you a compliment, a woman should say thank you. I guess sexual harassment is okay in her book? I don't know. On a woman's place in the world, she says, I'm going to tell you right now what a woman is. She came from Adam's rib. God created us with his hands. We may be the weaker sex. We are the weaker sex. But we are our partners, our husbands' wives. I guess getting her husband to move from the home where they raised their children so she could relocate to a district that she could win doesn't sound like she's the weaker member of that marital partnership. On the fact that gays and lesbians no longer feel the need to be closeted. Probably in about 4 or 5 generations, no one will be straight anymore. Everyone will be either gay, trans, or non-conforming. Whatever. Unplanned and unwanted pregnancies, she said, the very idea that women's rights don't matter, which is what they, Democrats, say, And our stance for pro-life is to support women. We support their pregnancies. We support them being mothers, even if the circumstances that they didn't plan. I guess she advocates forced birth. Her meanest and most outrageous statements may be her take on adoptive parents. Children are in greatest danger in America today because traditional family values are being destroyed. The idea of mom and dad together, not fake mom and fake dad, but biological mom and biological dad, who raise their children together and do what's right for their children. One of the main reasons children are given up for abortion, both by women and couples, is that they feel they will not be able, due to their circumstances, to be able to give the child its best life. And they often make the heart-wrenching decision to give the child up for adoption. Demanding that a woman have a child that she feels she may not be able to properly care for is bad enough. But then to call often childless couples who long for children they cannot conceive fake parents is by most standards beyond the pale. Taylor Greene most recently has pronounced herself as a Christian nationalist, an ideology that calls for dropping all barriers between church and state. Something like the Taliban, only with a pro-Christian anti-Semitic flavoring. Georgia, however, is not the only state with a far-right representative that likes to give a good soundbite and show a total lack of understanding of the First Amendment. The other member of the Howler Monkeys that had their outbursts at the past State of the Union address is Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado. She seems to have read the First Amendment in reverse and concerns about separation of church and state, or at least that's what her comments would suggest. She told a church group in her district, "The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not meant to direct the church. That's not how our founding fathers intended it. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk. That's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter. It means nothing like what they say it does." One would assume from her comments that she approves of how the Taliban is running Afghanistan. She jumped on a gaffe by President Biden when he misspoke when commenting on the case of a 10-year-old girl who had to go out of state to get an abortion after she was raped. And he said presidency when he meant pregnancy. She tweeted, "We need to terminate this presidency." End quote. Repeat the line. Which sparked concerns among her followers that she threatened the life of the president. I can see how some might read it that way, but their fears make me doubt their grasp on grammar. On Mike Huckabee's talk show on TBN, she had a rather childish comment about Representative Eric Swalwell of California, when asked why they never engaged in conversation. She goes, "Well, unfortunately, he only acts tough on Twitter. So I've actually tried to have conversations with Eric. Smells not so well. And it doesn't really work. He beelines away from me. So maybe I'm intimidating. Not sure, but he actually compared me to the Highland Park mass shooter." What? If childish name-calling weren't enough, she very clearly and intentionally misstated what he said. What he actually said on Twitter was, blaming the NRA shields those who actually have a vote. It also kind of suggests that but for the NRA, these Republicans would do the right thing. Why give them an alibi? Let's start naming names. It's not the NRA. The NRA is not on the ballot this November. But hundreds of Republicans to choose killers over our kids are on the ballot. Blame them. Choose our kids, not their killers. This is definitely hyperbole on his part. But it's far from comparing her personally to a mass murderer. Well, that's it for today. It'd be great if you'd like and subscribe. Feel free to have a go at me in the comment section. If you really like what I'm doing, feel free to visit my Patreon so I can bring you even higher quality material. So long, stay safe, drink one for me.